Welcome to the Midnight Teller. Before we dive into tonight's stories, if you're enjoying this content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. I worked at a mid-sized tech company for about 3 years. It was one of those places with an open office layout, ping pong tables, and free snacks in the break room. During the day, it was loud and busy, with about 100 employees spread across 2 floors. But at night, after everyone went home, it was a completely different place. I was part of the IT support team, and occasionally I'd have to work late to handle server maintenance or software updates that couldn't be done during business hours. Most of the time, I didn't mind. I'd throw on some headphones, order takeout, and get the work done in peace. This particular night happened about 6 months before I left the company. It was a Thursday in November, and I'd volunteered to stay late to install security updates on all the workstations. The updates had to be done overnight because they required multiple restarts, and we couldn't have employees losing work time. I got to the office around 6 p.m., right as everyone else was leaving. The place emptied out quickly. By 6:30, I was alone, or at least I thought I was. The building had badge access, so I knew no one could get in without swiping their ID card at the entrance. I started on the first floor, going desk to desk, logging into each computer and initiating the updates. It was tedious work, but straightforward. I had my headphones in, listening to a podcast, try and make the time pass faster. Around 8 p.m., I finished the first floor and headed up to the second. That's when I noticed something strange. One of the conference rooms had its light on. I could see the glow through the frosted glass walls. I walked over and looked inside. The room was empty, but the lights were definitely on, and the door was closed. I opened it, turned off the lights, and made a mental note to mention to facilities. Someone must have forgotten to turn them off before leaving. I continued with the updates, moving from desk to desk. The second floor was laid out in a big open space with clusters of desks separated by low dividers. In the center was a kitchen area, and along the perimeter were several conference rooms and a few private offices for managers. About halfway through, I took a break and went to the kitchen to grab some water. That's when I heard it, a phone ringing. Not a cell phone, but a desk phone with that old-fashioned landline ring. I walked toward the sound, trying to figure out which desk it was coming from. The ringing stopped just as I got close. I stood there for a moment, listening. But everything was silent again except for the hum of computers and the air conditioning. I shrugged it off and went back to work. But 20 minutes later, it happened again. The same phone, ringing in the same area. This time, I walked over immediately and found the desk. The nameplate said Marcus Chun, Senior Developer. I picked up the phone. Hello? There was silence on the other end. Not dead air, but the kind of silence where you can tell someone's there listening. Hello? I said again. Is someone there? Still nothing. Then, after a few seconds, the line went dead. I hung up and stared at the phone, feeling uneasy. I checked the caller ID screen. It said Internal Extension 2047. I pulled up the company directory on my laptop. Extension 2047 belonged to one of the conference rooms. The same conference room where I'd turned off the lights earlier. My stomach tightened. I walked back over the conference room. The lights were on again. I stood outside the door, staring at the lit room through the frosted glass. I could see the table, the chairs, the projector screen, but I couldn't see anyone inside. I opened the door slowly. The room was empty. I looked around, checked under the table, even opened the closet where they kept extra office supplies. Nothing. I turned off the lights again and closed the door. As I walked away, I heard the phone ring again. But this time, it wasn't Marcus's desk. It was coming from inside the conference room. I stopped and turned around. Through the frosted glass, I could see a shadow. Someone was sitting at the conference table. My heart started pounding. I walked back to the door and opened it. The room was empty. The lights were off. The phone had stopped ringing. I stood there, breathing hard, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. I pulled out my own phone and checked the building's access log remotely. According to the system, I was the only person who'd badged into the building since 6 p.m. No one else had entered. I decided I was done for the night. I could finish the updates remotely from home. I grabbed my stuff and headed for the stairs. As I reached the stairwell, I heard footsteps behind me. Not running, just walking. Slow, deliberate steps on the carpet. I turned around. The office was empty. The rows of desks stretched out in the dim emergency lighting, but there was no one there. I ran down the stairs and out of the building, not stopping until I was in my car with the doors locked. The next day, I told my manager what happened. He laughed it off, said I'd probably just spooked myself working alone at night. But then he mentioned something that made my blood run cold. Marcus Chun, the guy whose desk a phone call came to, had died 6 months earlier. Heart attack at his desk. They'd found him in the morning slumped over his keyboard. And the conference room, that was where they'd held his memorial service. I finished the updates remotely that night and never worked late in that office again. I used to work at a law firm on the 23rd floor of a high-rise downtown. It was a prestigious place, long hours, high pressure, but good pay. I was a paralegal, which meant I did a lot of grunt work, filing research, preparing documents. The kind of stuff that kept me at the office until 8 or 9 p.m. most nights. The building itself was old, built sometime in the 1970s, and it had that dated corporate aesthetic. Dark with paneling, fluorescent lights, and elevators that moved painfully slow. There were 4 elevators in the main lobby, but only 2 of them serviced the upper floors where our office was located. This happened during the winter, about 2 years ago. I was working late on a Friday night, finishing up a brief that was due Monday morning. Most of the office had already left for the weekend. By the time I wrapped up, it was close to 10 p.m. I packed my bag, turned off my desk lamp, and headed to the elevators. The hallway was dim, lit only by a few emergency lights since the main overheads were on a timer and had shut off around 8. I pressed the call button and waited. After a minute, one of the elevators dinged and the doors slid open. I stepped inside and hit the button for the lobby. The doors closed and the elevator started its slow descent. I pulled out my phone to check my messages, not really paying attention. Around the 15th floor, the elevator slowed and stopped. The doors opened. I looked up, expecting to see the 15th floor lobby, but instead, the doors opened to a dark hallway. The lights were off, and I could barely make out the shapes of desks and cubicles in the dim glow from the elevator. I didn't recognize the layout. Our building had multiple companies on different floors, and I'd never been to the 15th before. I waited for the doors to close, but they didn't. They just stayed open, the elevator chiming softly as if waiting for someone to get on. After a few seconds, I leaned forward and pressed the close door button. Nothing happened. I pressed it again, harder this time. Still nothing. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from somewhere in the dark office space. I felt a chill run down my spine. I pressed the closed door button repeatedly, but the elevator wouldn't respond. The footsteps got closer, and I could see a shadow moving in the darkness, heading toward the elevator. I jammed my finger on the lobby button. The closed door button, every button I could reach. Finally, the door started to close, slowly, agonizingly slowly. Just as they were about to shut, I saw a hand reach out from the darkness, pale and thin, fingers stretched toward the closing gap. The doors closed just in time. The elevator lurched and continued its descent. My heart was racing. I stood there, pressed against the back wall, staring at the doors. I told myself it was probably just a janitor or someone working late. But something about the way the hand had reached out, the way it moved, didn't feel right. The elevator reached the lobby and the doors opened. I practically ran out through the empty lobby and out onto the street. The next Monday, I asked the receptionist about the 15th floor. She gave me a strange look. The 15th floor, she said, that's been vacant for almost a year. The last tenant moved out, and no one's leased it since. Are you sure? I asked. I could have sworn I saw someone there. Positive. she said. Building management keeps it locked. No one has access. I never took the elevator alone after that. I'd wait until someone else was going down, or I'd take the stairs, all 23 flights. And whenever the elevator stopped on the 15th floor, which it did sometimes for no reason, I'd hold my breath and pray the doors wouldn't open, because I never wanted to see what was waiting in that dark office again. When I first started at my current job, I was excited. It was a marketing firm, small but growing, with about 30 employees. Everyone seemed friendly, the work was interesting, and the pay was decent. I was hired as a junior account manager, which mostly meant I assisted the senior staff with client projects. My desk was in an open area with about 10 other people. Directly across from me was a guy named Derek. He was in his mid-30s, been with the company for a few years, and seemed nice enough at first. He helped me learn the ropes, showed me how to use the project management software, introduced me to people. But after a few weeks, I started noticing things that made me uncomfortable. Derek would stare at me, not just glancing over occasionally, but full-on staring for minutes at a time. I'd look up from my computer and catch him watching me, and he wouldn't look away. He'd just keep staring until I broke eye contact first. I tried to brush it off, told myself he was just spacing out or thinking about something, but it kept happening, multiple times a day. Then he started asking personal questions. Where did I live? Did I live alone? What did I do on weekends? At first, I thought he was just being friendly, try to get to know me, but the questions felt invasive, and he'd ask them over and over, even after I'd already answered. One day, I came back from lunch and found a note on my desk. It was handwritten, just a few lines. You looked really nice today. I like the way you smile. D. I felt my stomach drop. I looked over at Derek. He was watching me, smiling. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Didn't want to seem like I was overreacting. So I threw the note away and tried to ignore it. But the notes kept coming. Every few days, I'd find a new one. Sometimes they were compliments. Sometimes they were just weird. One said, I dreamed about you last night. Another said, we'd be good together. I started feeling anxious coming to work. I'd avoid making eye contact with Derek. Would take my lunch breaks at different times to avoid running into him in the break room. Then things escalated. One night, I was working late, finishing up a presentation for a client meeting the next morning. Most of the office had cleared out by 7 p.m., but I still had a couple of hours of work left. Around 8:30, I got up to use the bathroom. When I came back, Derek was standing at my desk, looking at my computer screen. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Can I help you with something? He turned and smiled. Just wanted to see what you were working on. Looks good. Thanks, but I've got it covered. He didn't move. He just stood there, too close, invading my space. Derek, I really need to finish this. I could help you, he said. We could work on it together. Maybe grab dinner after? No, thanks. I'm good. His smile faded. You know, you're not very friendly. I've been trying to be nice to you, and you just blow me off. I appreciate your help when I started, but I'm not interested in anything beyond a professional relationship. His expression darkened. You think you're too good for me? I didn't say that. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice low. Then he turned and walked away. I stood there, shaking. I packed up my stuff immediately and left, not caring about the presentation. The next day, I went to HR. I told them everything. The staring, the notes, the confrontation. They said they'd look into it. Derek was moved to a different team, and I didn't have to work directly with him anymore. But he was still in the building, and I'd see him sometimes in the hallways or the break room. He'd always stare at me, that same unsettling look. A few weeks later, I started noticing my car had been moved in the parking garage. Just slightly, like someone had gotten in and adjusted the seat and mirrors. I always parked in the same spot, and I knew I'd left everything a certain way. Then I found a note under my windshield wiper. Same handwriting as before. I know where you park. I reported it to HR and to building security. They checked the garage cameras, but the footage was grainy and inconclusive. I started parking on the street. Even though it was more expensive, I varied my schedule, coming in at different times, leaving at different times. I was constantly looking over my shoulder. One night, I got home and found something on my apartment door. Another note. You can't avoid me forever. That's when I called the police. They took a report, but said unless he made a direct threat or I had proof he was the one leaving the notes, there wasn't much they could do. I ended up quitting that job. I couldn't handle the anxiety anymore, the constant fear that he was watching, that he knew where I was. I found out later, through a former coworker, that Derek was eventually fired. Apparently, I wasn't the first person he'd done this to. There have been complaints at his previous job too. I'm at a new company now, and things are better, but I still get nervous when I notice someone paying too much attention to me. And I always check my car in my apartment before I assume I'm safe. Because now I know that some people don't take no for an answer, and sometimes working with someone every day is all it takes for them to think they know you, that they have a right to you. I worked as a security guard for a few years while I was putting myself through college. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid okay, and the overnight shifts meant I could go to classes during the day. Most of the time, it was boring. You'd sit at a desk, watch monitors, do occasional patrols, and try not to fall asleep. One of my regular assignments was a corporate office building downtown. 12 stories, mostly law firms, consulting companies, and financial services. During the day, it was busy. At night, it was dead. My shift started at 11 p.m. and ended at 7 a.m. The routine was simple. Monitor the security cameras, check in with the overnight cleaning crew when they arrived around midnight, and do a patrol of each floor once every 2 hours. This happened about a year into working there. It was a Tuesday night, middle of February. I clocked in, settled into the security desk in the lobby, and was flipping through the camera feeds on the monitors. The cleaning crew arrived right on schedule. There were 3 of them, Maria, Carlos, and a younger guy named Luis. They checked in with me, and I gave them access to the service elevator. Around 1 a.m., I started my first patrol. I took the elevator up to the 12th floor and worked my way down, checking doors, making sure everything was locked and secure. Most of the floors were identical. Open office layouts, conference rooms, break rooms. Dark and quiet. When I got to the 8th floor, something felt off. I stepped off the elevator and immediately noticed the temperature. It was cold, way colder than the other floors. I walked through the main office area, shining my flashlight across the desks and cubicles. Everything looked normal, but the cold was intense. I could see my breath. I checked the thermostat. It was set to 68 degrees, same as every other floor, but it felt like it was 50, maybe colder. I made a note to report it to building maintenance and continued my patrol. That's when I heard it. A voice, faint, coming from one of the private offices in the back. I stopped and listened. It sounded like someone talking, but I couldn't make out the words. I walked toward the office, my hand on my radio, ready to call for backup if I needed to. The door to the office was closed. I could see a light underneath, and I could hear the voice more clearly now. It was a woman, speaking in a calm, steady tone, like she was on a phone call. I knocked on the door. Security. Is someone in there? The voice stopped immediately. The light under the door went out. I tried the handle. It was locked. I knocked again, louder this time. This is building security. I need you to open the door. Nothing. I radioed down to the desk, but it was just me that night. No one else to call. I radioed the cleaning crew, asked if they'd seen anyone on the 8th floor. Maria said they were on the 3rd floor and hadn't seen anyone. I stood outside the door for a few more minutes, listening. Everything was silent. I made another note to check the access logs when I got back to the desk and continued my patrol. When I got back to the lobby, I pulled up the security footage for the 8th floor. I rewound when I'd been up there and watched the feed. I could see myself walking through the office area, stopping, listening. I could see myself walk to the office door and knock. But here's the thing, the light in that office never came on. Not on the camera. The hallway was dark the entire time, but I know what I saw. There was a light under that door, and I heard someone talking. I checked the access logs. No one had badged into the building since the cleaning crew arrived, and the 8th floor required a key card to access from the elevator. No one without authorization could have gotten up there. I didn't go back to the 8th floor that night. I stayed at the desk, watching the monitors. Around 4 a.m., I saw something on one of the cameras. The 8th floor, in the same office where I'd heard the voice, I saw a shadow move across the frosted glass door. Just a quick movement, like someone walking past. I watched for another 10 minutes, but nothing else happened. When the cleaning crew finished around 5 a.m., I asked Maria if they'd been to the 8th floor. She said no, they'd skipped it tonight because they'd done a deep clean there the day before. I told her what I'd experienced. She gave me a look I'll never forget. Not surprised, not skeptical. Just knowing. The 8th floor, she said. Yeah, we don't like going up there. Why not? Things happen up there. Lights that shouldn't be on. Sounds. One time, Carlos said he saw someone standing in one of the offices, just staring at him through the glass. When he went to check, no one was there. Why didn't anyone tell me this? She shrugged. Would you have believed us? She had a point. I worked that building for another 6 months, but I never went to the 8th floor alone again. I'd do my patrols with Luis or Carlos, and we'd move through quickly, not stopping unless we had to. I don't know what was in that office, or who I heard talking that night, but I know it wasn't my imagination, and I know I'm not the only one who's experienced something strange on that floor. Some places just have something wrong with them, and sometimes the night shift means you're the one who has to find out.